Natalie Portman is here. She makes her directorial debut in A Tale of Love and Darkness. She also wrote and stars in the film. It is adapted from Amos Oz' best-selling 2002 memoir. The film chronicles the founding of Israel through the lens of his family. Here's the trailer for the film.
המדינה שלנו כבר ממש עומדת בשער.
היא לא עומדת. אין שום שער. יש תהום.
אמא, את בסדר?
בוא ננציח את סיפור.
מה זה קבליר?
קבליר זה אביר. היום אתה תהיה הקבליר שלי. אפילו אחרי שתחיה חיים שלמים ותתנסה בכל מיני ניסיונות, התמימות הזאת לא תתקלף לך אף פעם.
I'm pleased to have Natalie Portman back at this table. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
The obvious question is, why this film for your directorial debut? First of all, it's in Hebrew.
Yes.
Second, when you started being interested in it, you were too young to play Fania.
It's true.
Tell me about the development.
So when I read the book, it was when it first came out in translation. It was almost 10 years ago, and it was so moving to me immediately, and I saw the film in front of my eyes as I was reading, which I think is testament to Oz's writing, of course. But immediately I wanted to direct it, and I didn't really think of playing the part because I was 26 or something, and it took me so long to get it together to be able to make the film that I actually aged into being able to play the role.
But even then, you really wanted to just direct.
Yes.
And then when you went to get the money, people say...
Yes, you're crazy, you know. Your first film in Hebrew, and you have no, known actors. How do you expect us to give you money for this? So that also helped persuade me to be in it, yes.
What was it about this?
Well, I think the language is so beautiful in the book, and it really deals with this period of time that I've heard about so much in my own family. I was born in Israel. My grandparents on my father's side moved to what was then British Mandate Palestine from Eastern Europe as refugees. And so I've had, when you imagine something your whole life, that sort of creates a visual repertoire for what you can create as a director.
Amos Oz was excited about the film being made?
Well, he was incredibly generous. I think it was always hard for him because, he said from the beginning, this is going to be hard. This is my story. It's me. It's my name. It's me as a child. It's my mother. It's my writing, of course, my book. All of it is so personal. So just beware. I'm going to be emotional with this. But he's been incredibly supportive and loving with the film, and by extension with me, was very, he said to me from the beginning, make it your own, the book exists, so don't try and film the book.
Take a look at this. This is an interview with Amos Oz on this show in 2011, talking about his mother, who Natalie plays. Here it is. Your mother committed suicide?
Yes, she killed herself
when
I was 12.
38 or so?
Yes, she was 38 and I was 12 and a half.
Did your father ever talk to you about it?
Never, no.
Not one word?
We never talked about it, never. Not him, not me, never until his dying day, not a word.
Not a word?
Not a word about her, as if she never existed. Not only about her death, we never talked about her life, we never talked about her. He and I erased her from our lives. I don't know about him, but I was very angry with her for killing herself.
Yeah.
As if she ran off with a lover without leaving us a note. She who always insisted that anyone who leaves the home leaves a note under the flower vase telling where he is gone and when he is or she is coming back. She left us without a note. So I was angry with her.
For a long
I was
time.
angry with my father for losing her, and I was angry with myself because I was sure it's my fault. If I would have been a good little boy, she would have stayed. So for many years I was anger and silence and anger.
And how did you come to grips with it all?
Well, with age, I began to look at my parents as if they were my children, as if I was my parents' parent. And I could think about them with a smile, with sympathy, with humor, with compassion, and with curiosity.
So that's the woman you play.
Yeah, I mean, it's moving to watch him talk about it. He's such a heart and soul and mind all at once. But yeah, it's incredible, and you really see that having to tell his mother's story, to have to tell himself his mother's story, was obviously formative for him as a writer.
She lived in a fantasy world in part, didn't she?
In part, I think he describes it as Slavic melancholy, and I think there is this sort of tragic romanticism of that Slavic literature that she grew up in, that, you know, the equation of sadness with beauty makes living with disappointed dreams that much more difficult. And it's beautiful to see sort of his evolution as a writer in this gap that she leaves for him. She leaves this absence.
The interesting thing, too, in a sense that your story of Israel is a story of dreams and at the same time reality.
Right. Absolutely. That very much her experience as an immigrant and her experience as a mother and as a wife of having these expectations that are unfulfilled by the new country, by the husband, by her position in society as a woman.
So she was an early feminist.
I mean, I don't know if she would define herself as that, but for sure, I think there was frustration.
Sure.
Yeah, and you see that with, you know, the Zionist dreams, as Oz says. There are many Zionisms. There's not one. There were hundreds of Zionisms. There was a religious Zionism. There was a completely secular, utopian, socialist Zionism, and none of those dreams have turned out the way that the dreamers dreamed.
Yeah.
And but how you deal with a disappointed dream sort of depends on your mental health, I think.
Yeah. This Hebrew language was crucial for you.
Yes.
More than anything.
It was really important because it's one of the most magical things to me, if not the most magical thing about this time, is that they revived a language, which I don't think has ever happened in the history of the world, that a language that was essentially dead becomes, and Oz says something beautiful, that it became a modern language when the first boy said to the first girl, "I love you," or girl to boy in modern Hebrew, which is what makes a language alive.
He was surprised that the book became an international bestseller.
Yes.
He said, "This is an Israeli story."
Yeah, he says that he thought it would be, you know, a particular corner in Jerusalem that would read it, and that was it, because it's so specific. But of course, the most specific things end up being the most universal. He has, and was incredibly loving about it. He was very, very. He really loved it, which was very meaningful to me, because, of course, more than anything, I revere him.
Why did she commit suicide? For some of the things you said, frustration.
Yeah, I think
reality didn't match your vision.
I think it's a mystery, and it's actually something he asked. He gave me very few guidelines, Amos, when he gave me permission to make the film, but he said, don't try to answer it. He said, people have asked me permission before to make the film, but they would always adapt the screenplay and make it like she had a lover that died back in Europe and she thought about him all the time, or, you know, they'd always try and give some explanation. And he says, who knows the answer is who knows?
He doesn't know?
No, I think there's many things that you could say, but ultimately, no one knows. And I think there are. I mean, I tried to show in the film the different, pressures of living in a place that's extremely violent, of having lost everything in the place you came from as a refugee from, absolute annihilation of your community and in Europe, and the pressures of being a woman and not being able to express yourself, and and just having this romantic outlook on the world that is not matched by reality.
And then Israel was to have an early female prime minister.
That's true.
In Golda.
That's true, which Fania, of course, did not.
So tell me about your feeling. When you were 3, you moved to the United States with your family, but you were born there. You experienced very early.
Yes.
Have you continued to go back? Have you stayed involved? Does Israel flow through your own veins in a sense as something that's living and breathing and crucial to your own being?
Yes, it does. I go back. I've gone back regularly my whole life. My dad's side of the family continues to live there now, and it has been a big part of my life and everything I think about and the way I see the world. And I'm not Israeli. I'm not totally American. I feel American, and I obviously have citizenship and have lived most of my life here. But of course, I have this sort of outsider status because I am also born out of the country and immigrated here. So it's definitely a major influence on me and the way I see the world.
But you related to her stories, and you related to so many of the stories that he tells.
Yes, absolutely, because I think that that whole mythology of where we came from is it's wildly similar when you hear the kinds of stories that are told and repeated, because it's I don't know, maybe it's a family thing in general, but you hear the same stories over and over again, and they create your identity.
Know those stories, yeah, exactly. Yeah. You've also stayed and have been vocal about the politics of Israel. Mm-hmm. Do you worry about its survival?
I think we're certainly at a critical point where, things need decisions need to be made to create a better future for everyone living there, because
some people think that the possibility of a two-state solution is shrinking daily.
It's certainly difficult, and it's understandable too. I mean, how many times, how many years can people be hurt? And I'm talking about people on both sides, and still have intentions to try and reconcile. We see it so often on an individual basis. If you think of collective, emotions, and in an individual way, it's understandable that there's not a whole lot of desire to reconcile after that long of being hurt, but it also is kind of the only way forward, because no one wants to live this way forever. No one wants their children to live this way forever.
And how do they think it's going to end? You have no sense of...
There's no long-term
When does
vision.
Fatigue set in after all these years, so that people say, as they did in Ireland,
right?
We can't continue this.
Right, exactly. And that's...
And everybody tries. Every single new president of the United States tries to do what he can, or perhaps she can. To do something about it. And each year, we sent George Mitchell over, and then John Kerry made a strong effort, and it continues. Some critics call this a love letter to Israel. Do you see it that way?
No, it's really funny that it came out that way, because, it's very much that it's, not that it came out that way, but that it's perceived that way, because it's very much, to me, a family story and an individual story. And then there's this backdrop, which is the state. And in fact, if anything, I find myself a critical citizen the same way I am in the United States. Yes. I think a good citizen is a critical citizen. And so, when it was perceived that way, it was surprising to me, but it's not meant really as a political statement. It's meant as a family story with a historical backdrop.
Did you seek out advice on directing?
A bit. Mostly in the editing process, I really went to director friends and asked for opinions, which was very helpful, because that was really my first time in that process. And then otherwise, just it's been over 20 years now that I've been acting, and so I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of wonderful directors.
Did you always know you would go to direct? I mean, early on, did you feel that?
No, I don't know that I knew very early, but for the past 15 years, I mean, like, since I turned 20, I was thinking that I wanted to direct, and especially, we all bemoan the lack of female directors, and you can't complain about it and then just not do it. You're like, where are they? And then, luckily, if you have the opportunity to do it, and the desire and the vision, then.
But I can imagine being on set. I mean, if someone who at age 20 or 25 thought that they might want to direct and the right thing came along, they would want to do it for lots of reasons. Then if you're there with somebody who's really an acknowledged master, you want to be watching, you want to be asking some questions, even if you're simply an actress or an actor on the film.
Yes, no, I mean, I mean specifically about this project, I wasn't saying what should I do on this day, but yes, absolutely. Every time I'm on set, I ask, I talk to DPs a lot too, the cinematographers, to understand why they're choosing the camera they choose, the lens they choose, if it is film, what kind of film and why, and understanding, learning that how directors choose their color palettes and make music decisions. All of those were really helpful, because that's what you don't get involved in much as an actor.
And what was the most challenging part of that?
Music was very, very challenging.
To create mood, to create...
Because I'm very specific about music, and I had music that I had in my mind that I would play all the time while I was writing, while I was directing, that really created the mood. But then when you put it on the image and the emotion is the same, it doubles up and it's too much. So actually the music that works it's counterintuitive. It's like not what you think is the emotion. So that was really surprising and challenging.
And where did you film it?
We filmed almost entirely in Jerusalem, and then we filmed a little bit in the desert outside, and also in the north to get the kibbutz and some of the more dream sequences.
Mostly Israeli actors?
All Israeli actors except for me, who I'm
you're Israeli.
Part. Yes, and also a few Palestinian or Arab Israeli nationals.
When will it open in Israel?
Oh, it opened in Israel last summer, actually.
Oh, last summer.
And
I see. So you waited
it opened there first, and was very nicely received, which was great.
And how did they see it? I mean, did they see it as a story of the founding of the modern state of Israel?
Yes, and I also think...
And the story of their favorite novelist?
A national treasure.
Yeah, clearly a national treasure.
Yes. I think both. For sure. I mean, it was really interesting how moved people were. There's a scene when the UN vote to approve the creation of the state of Israel happens, and when we were shooting it, I mean, everyone was just like, because it's a story, it's sort of, I think the equivalent of, I mean, not the equivalent, but how people say they remember where they were and the JFK assassination,
the man on the moon or whatever,
right? Or the man in the moon, and people. It's a story that people tell. Like that's the story that everyone's heard.
That's what they remember when they heard on the radio of the UN vote.
Yeah, that's what we've heard from our grandparents and parents, and so to be there and to sort of recreate that, everyone was very, very emotional while we were shooting it.
And have you had the opportunity to talk to people who sort of participated in that? I mean, they're obviously dying away now.
Yeah, well, Amos was the most amazing person to describe it to us, because he was a child then, of course, but he said that there was just this scream, this collective scream that just sounded like the voices of everyone who had ever died and everyone who was living, just screaming out. Because it was obviously this incredible, tragic joy of having lost everything, but now finally having their own place. And that his father said to him, which is in the film, now that we have a Jewish state, you'll never be bullied again for being Jewish, which, of course, is like a tragic thing to think
is.
now that that was, that was
I mean,
the
you wonder
belief.
whether Israel would be a different place today if it hadn't had to constantly live with the struggle that it lives, and at the same time, for better or worse.
Right.
In a sense,
Right.
some of the political fights that have taken place there, if in fact, and you wonder about the Palestinians, if they'd had a
course.
homeland and they'd had a place.
Of course.
And that they had been able to coexist peacefully together, and how both might have, created something really wonderful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it started in '48 when they could have accepted the UN mandate at the time.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a tragedy for both peoples, but hopefully not over. It's hopefully something possible to change still.
What is the WE charity?
We Day is it's a group that tries to get both children in the developing world and the developed world into a new place. So in the developing world, they build schools that have wells and latrines and healthcare and small business loans for the mothers of the children who go there, all in one village, so that they create this really sustainable school model. And in the developed world, they get young kids to raise money for these schools, and then they go help build them. And then they also support just kids feeling empowered that they can do something to change the world. So it's a really wonderful kind of group that I've been lucky enough to be a small participant in, that really gets kids helping other kids.
How do you think making this film has changed you?
It was really interesting when I first started, that I wasn't used to expressing my opinion so in a clear way, and expressing what I wanted. And Jill Soloway, who's the creator of Transparent, among other things, she's a woman I really admire, had this speech last year about how she thinks that part of the reason there's not so many female directors is that she's said that directing is very much about desire, and that we aren't comfortable with female desire. And you have to say, I want that, I want that, I want that.
Yeah.
And it was hard for me at the beginning when they would say, what color should we make this wall in the house? Or, do you think the length of this skirt is right? Or what kind of filter do you want to put on the lens? I would say, I'm not sure. Tell me if this is stupid, but I
You don't do that anymore.
No, and no one wants you. When you're the leader, they
That's
want you to
exactly right.
say, I want this, I want that, I like that, that's not good, that's not right, and you have to be clear and direct. And I knew what I wanted, I just didn't know how to express it. And it was an amazing, within a week, I was very comfortable. But it was interesting to see that, at 31 when I directed it, I still hadn't developed that in myself, and this definitely helped me develop that, just clarity and comfort with saying what I want.
And what does
before I
your
start.
family think?
My family's been really wonderful about it and supportive of it, and it's obviously meaningful to them too, because it is sort of a piece
So
of
personal.
our story too.
Thank you for coming. Much success.
Thank you so much for having me again.
It opens, A Tale of Love and Darkness opens on Friday, August 19th. Friday, August 19th, A Tale of Love and Darkness. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.